All right.
Okay.
We are live.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess we should start the podcast first before we get into it in any big way, since nobody's listening at the moment, So,
You
all
want me to
right,
start? You
let's
want to
do
start?
it. I'll start.
All right.
Good morning, Doug. How are you doing?
I'm all right. How are you?
A week out.
A week,
A
yeah, a
little
little
more
bit
than a
of.
week out.
Yep. Yep.
I'm doing well. I appreciated that news about the onion. But our listeners probably don't even know what the onion is, or many of them, because they're not from the U.S. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, when I was in graduate school, the Onion was just getting started in Madison, or had just gotten started recently, out of Madison, Wisconsin, and they had I mean, it was like a local paper that they would sort of drop off in piles, around free, around the
right.
campus of the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and it was hilarious.
Yeah,
So, and now it's gone national.
yeah. It came out of Harvard, I think, originally, right, or
No,
Cambridge
no,
at least. I
no.
thought
I
it was
think it's
published in Cambridge.
UMadison. No, UMadison.
Really? Oh, okay. I've been giving
Yep.
everybody the wrong news. Okay.
Yep.
Well,
At least as far as I know. At least as far as I know, it began in Madison.
We'll have to look into that. But
yeah.
Anyway, we were joking earlier, friends, because the Onion is a paper that has very serious headlines, or seems serious, but they're actually a joke. And now we're faced with headlines that seem like a joke but are actually serious.
Yes.
And it's a little disconcerting,
to say the least.
Yeah. Anyway, that does sort of relate to our conversation today, I guess, doesn't it? Actually,
it does.
More than sort of.
It does. Sankharas.
Yeah, as we move into move along in the aggregates and the dependent origination, and basically the cycle of samsara.
Yeah.
So
Sankharas. This is one of the toughest ones for a lot of people to get their minds around, because the word is almost untranslatable.
How do you translate it?
I usually call it volitional formations when it comes up in the context of the aggregates. But the word Sankharas is used in various different contexts in the Dharma. So it can be a little confusing because, it's not always used in the context of the skandhas, the aggregates. So, it gets confusing for people. It's the word.
Well, go ahead.
No, I was going to say the word itself, Sankhara, essentially means being put together, being constructed. Sankhara, it means put together, basically, in Pali, Sanskrit. And so it's basically the way that all things are constructed out of whatever they're constructed out of, bits, in the world. In other words, we can look at it as, Sankharas in the broader sense means all of conditioned or constructed reality, including all of the external world, in a sense, all of our skandhas, all of the aggregates are themselves constructed. So, in that sense, it's something quite broad. But when we're talking about it just in the sense of this one aggregate of Sankhara, it means more like volitions, or our intentions, our will, our actions. It's what gets us karma, basically.
And so that's what's so interesting, right? Because volition. I always translate it as fabrications, but it doesn't matter. Yeah. So it's like the actions generally arise from those fabrications. Which are the result of how we are essentially putting together this combination of form, feeling, perception, and then something has created out of that, if we look at it that way, right? And from that, action can take place if we are not aware of how quickly that's all happened and that we're caught up in these fabrications.
Yeah.
And the it's kind of the root of everything we're talking about. It's the root or it's the what's the word I'm looking for? It results in, it's the first obvious result of everything that the Buddha is trying to free himself from. In other words, the suffering that results from sankharas, from that volitional formation, which results in an action, results then in some level of suffering as it all comes together, and we see, oh, what a mess I've made of myself, or whatever it is,
Right.
Now, I mean, those volitional formations can also create, of course, wholesome karma.
Yeah.
I mean, it's how we relate to the formation that's important. How one relates, how it unfolds,
Right.
and where along the line is there where along the way are the places we can interrupt the process and see things more clearly.
Yeah.
And of course, as we see things more clearly, and this is where it gets into the famous line from the Heart Sutra, right? As we see things more clearly, we start to see that all these words that we've put onto things are themselves, and all these ideas that we've attached to things are themselves empty of everything, right? They are all fabricated, and so, oh, well, then how do we work with that, and it just, it's fascinating, if we really, I think obviously it's important for us all who are exploring the mind and exploring, or I should say, exploring mind, how this all fits together, and then in a sense, once you've seen that and are able to see it and experience clearly, you just kind of, in a sense, let it go, right? And then what happens?
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's important and essential, in a sense, I mean, in our practice, to really have to clearly see this, to have that, have those insights into how this mind fabricates, basically, and what do we do with those fabrications?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think the centrality of it to our practice comes, I would say, most emphasized in the dependent origination, the formula of dependent origination, where Sankharas is the second. After, so in other words, at least in the traditional, the longest sort of 12-step, the 12-link chain, the various different expressions of dependent origination in the sutras. So, but the most famous, perhaps, is this 12-link one that begins in ignorance, and out of ignorance comes Sankharas. So that's literally the second step. That ignorance is enough to bring these sankharas into existence. And I mean, the idea being that without that ignorance, there would be no sankharas. I mean, that's really what the Buddha is saying, because without the, in the sort of negative version of the 12-step, 12-link dependent origination, that's what happens. You eliminate ignorance, so then sankharas are eliminated. So what it's saying is that, to an extent, any time we're engaging in these kinds of what end up being ego-driven intentions and volitions and actions, there is always going to be some residual amount of ignorance involved, that we're trying, that even when we're doing something that's beneficial, which of course the Buddha is all in favor. I mean, it's good to do things that are kind and compassionate and so on, and that is a sankhara. Those are sankharas. At least in those of us who are not enlightened, we can still do beneficial actions, but usually they're ego driven. We're doing them at least in some small part, and maybe even a larger part, because we want something good ourselves. We're donating because we want a better life for ourselves as well as other people, or we're doing something nice to somebody because we want to get a compliment from them. There's any number of ways that we can engage in beneficial actions or beneficial intentions, but with this residual kind of ego sense involved that we want to get something out of them as well. So
yeah, it is. Even if what we're getting out of it is better karma, so we have a better, and
right.
That's of course when we start to really look that closely. It's like, it's like, where is the me in all of this, and how is the me relating to these actions I'm about to take? And can I just do the action? Can the action just happen without the me involved and needing something from it? So yeah.
There's one sutta that I remember I did a video on recently, where the Buddha talks about 4 different kinds of karma: bright karma, dark karma, bright and dark karma, which is, I think, a lot of what we do is bright and dark, with elements of
so there's still elements of selfishness,
of selfishness, greed, as well as positive. And then the 4th would being neither bright nor dark, and that is, of course, we're looking. That's the intention here, is to get to a place where we're really not creating any kind of karma, because we're not doing things out of an ego drive. But it's hard to get there.
and who knows when they get there, right? It's exactly. Like, because as soon as the knowing comes in of that, I've gotten there, then you're out of there. That's what's so
and if I'm trying to get myself there,
exactly. So there is just an arriving, there is just awakening. There is no one being awakened and no one to awake. And yet we can, and it's fascinating because I think I mentioned last week that I started taking an improv class at Second City.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
I'm in Chicago. I thought, and I love improvising, and it's kind of how I live, and certainly how I teach, generally, as you know, and in improvising, you try not. You're conscious of because we're doing it in a group, and so you're with others, and you're feeding others. You're kind of supporting others as you are supporting yourself, because you want the story to go forward. And if you create a scenario or you say something where there's no way to respond, where it's just like a dead end, you've just handed your teammate basically he's stuck, or they're stuck, and it's like, okay, so, and what can get in the mind is in fact these formations, which are trying in my mind to create a whole story, but that may not be what gets handed on. And so it needs to sort of come from just pure awareness and pure response. And it's fascinating to watch. And, and so you start in a way with the physical, right? And you're just kind of like throwing imaginary balls and needing to catch them. And it's like, oh, okay. And then that loosens the body up, which can then loosen the mind up in a way. And so this process is fascinating. And we can see, at least I can see, like that when I get wrapped up in like the what ifs and the if onlys and if this and that, and it's like, or I see something or someone who, and this is why it's, right now, everybody is feeling just so, not everybody, sorry, those on a certain political side, right? And pardon me if you're not, are feeling a particular way because our minds are just going into these worst case scenarios, which are then fed even more by decisions that are being made and headlines that we see. And it's like, oh no, you're kidding, and it keeps us up at night because, or at least wakes me up in the middle of the night. It's like, oh wow, it's like, where is this going to go? And so it's so easy to see it now, when we're confronted with something that's clearly problematic, no matter what side you're on, and this is, suffering, clearly, and so people, I have a day long that I'm doing here in Chicago, and I know a couple of our fans are coming, but it's just like, and it's quite well registered because people just want to be, and they want the silence, I think, because yes, of course, in the silence you can proliferate that much more, right? Because it's all just like suddenly things are getting quiet and you can really see, and that often happens, right? When you go on retreat, it's like the first few days are just nothing but formations and formations and formations and more formations, and then because hopefully in that context of just the quiet, one is consciously stepping back from it and just watching it as opposed to engaging it. And so the practice is one of watching the Sankharas be built. You got these fabrications happening. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of amazing, and what happens when you just step back and and that kind of removes fuel, or it can remove fuel, and certainly not when others are also silent, they're not adding fuel as well. Right. And so,
well, I mean, the other thing about it is that people like to be, I think, at times like this, in community.
Oh, absolutely. No question.
And
no question.
So whether it's a community of any kind, but a community of silence like you have in a retreat can be fantastic. I mean, of course, there's a million different ways to be in a retreat, but certainly one way is feeling a sense of just feeling the community and the power of that togetherness.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can be very healing at a time
Well,
like this.
I mean, I can tell you our morning Sangha which was created in a crisis 4 years ago with COVID, has now come back and almost those numbers, because people are just wanting to be with others and partly to be with others in silence.
Yeah.
And there is something, really, it's just a moment of being is liberating when you realize you can do it. And then, hopefully our practice is at a point where we recognize, oh, but I don't have to, I can actually stop at any point of the day and just step back from this wild and crazy mind we have, and watch.
Yeah.
And, that is key, I think, to certainly key to freedom from stress, at least. Maybe not full awakening, but it's like at least we can wake up to relieve ourselves from, there's some relief in that. When we start to see it clearly.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that comes to mind when we're talking about sankharas and volitions and intentions is that, one of the key ways that we create stress and suffering for ourselves is when, or to the extent that we envision our actions and intentions as having real control over the way things are out in the world. And this is one, in the Buddha's what is it, second sermon, where he talks about non-self. I mean, this is exactly where he points to, is this idea that we have this kind of control, and that simply by ginning up these sankharas, these intentions, these constructions, formations, we can form the world into our way of wanting things.
Right.
And that is, I mean, you know, I think of, well, certainly it's the case in politics. You know, you think you can make other people behave the way you want to. And this is true whether you're on one spectrum or the other.
Sure, of course.
Good luck, you know. Good luck. What happens is you get disappointed pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And so you find, you know, these, you know, titans of industry, billionaires out there getting upset and angry because they, you know, they're not able to get what they want, you know, with their money. So they join politics and try to get what they want politically, and they're not going to be able to, not at least not everything. And so they're going to get pissed off. And, you know, it's this kind of cycle of, and this is, you know, it's true in politics, but it's true in our own lives as well, that,
of course,
you know, we get continually upset and disappointed and frustrated because in our own lives, we want things a certain way. And so we think, okay, if I do this, and I'm just a good boy or whatever, you know, this is going to happen. And, you know, good luck. Sometimes it works, but not always, you know.
And I think what's really important here is referring back to the Eightfold Path. You know, so right view, which is the first factor, is like, this is part of right view, of course, is seeing this. And then right intention in this instance, I would say, is like recognizing that this is humanity. I mean, this is part of human nature, you know, are these sankharas. And so when they arise, as they arise, and when they arise, of course, they're going to arise always. You know, it's like, what is the emotional, what is the intention that we're bringing to it, or what is the right, you know, are we bringing a curious and kindly attitude, or are we bringing, oh, this has to stop attitude, and, you know, one that's sort of fueled by aversion versus care, and just like, yeah, that's just the mind doing what the mind does. And I'm not necessarily going to be able to stop that right away, but at least I can understand it and see it and accept it, you know. And once I'm there, I can just be sort of fascinated by it. And then once I'm fascinated by it, I can recognize that, oh yeah, you know, if I don't engage in some way, if, you know, I don't throw something into it, it just starts to quiet down, you know, at least for a minute or two. And what's that like, you know, to have the mind that is like free of sankharas for a minute? Wow. It's like, where'd they go? Where'd they go? You know, and I remember, you know, in an MBSR class, when we get to class 5, I think, and we suggest that people look at their thoughts. You know, it's like, or just like the thoughts become the object of awareness. And the moment, often I've experienced when you say that, and then when you try to do it, suddenly there's nothing to see. It's almost as if looking at them throws a wrench in the machine that's creating them.
Yeah.
The image that's often brought in, I think, is like that cartoon mouse hole, and the mouse and the cat standing in front of it, waiting for the mouse to emerge. You know, and you know, you're waiting for the next thought to come up, and it never comes. Like,
and then you're lost in a thought. You know, and then
of course, yeah. Wow, it's like, well, yeah. That's the second. Yeah, I mean, it is amazing. Right, you get lost in that thought and think, wow, I have no thoughts. Oh, wow, I've accomplished something. And then
that reminds me of something it reminds me of something yesterday.
Yeah, or you know, something loud happens outside and you get, you know, something, that creates another form, which then, has a feeling and a perception, and then the whole thing starts again. It's like, you see it happening at that moment. And that's actually a great moment. Like, yeah, did you notice what happened when that cell phone went off? Everybody was silent, but this one person didn't turn their phone off. And like, you're thinking first, or the thought arises, an idiot, why didn't they turn off their phone? And then the next thought is, did I turn off my phone?
Yeah, right.
It's like,
Yeah.
What if I didn't turn off my phone and it goes off? And it's actually entertaining in a way, and it's entertaining if we don't take it so seriously. And that's also part of, for me anyway, wise intention is like, treat it lightly.
Yeah.
See it and treat it lightly. And it's like, because it never ends in a way. And they're great. Somebody was telling me about a person who was doing a meditation comedy routine, and all they did was on their phone, they recorded all, a bunch of thoughts. And then they sat there in meditation and turned their recording on. And, you would hear this person talking to themselves on the recording and having all these thoughts. And it was perfect. It's just like, just amazing what comes up and what we start to see. And the real question is then, and I think I've talked about this before, right, in terms of karma, right? And we might consider some of these thoughts as karmic seeds coming to fruition. And, as they arise, the real question is, do you respond, do you act on them or not?
Yeah.
Right? And then who's doing the acting? And so if there's, an unwholesome seed that arises, like, I really need to name your unwholesome thought, I need to do that. And you see it arising, and then the decision, the resulting action is to do nothing. Then that karmic seed has taken care of itself, but there's been no action on it. This is one way of looking at it, right? On the other hand, if a karmic seed arises that it says, I should, donate to this, and then donation happens, then the wholesome karmic seed has been acted upon, and another wholesome seed has been laid, or planted. So this is a kind of interesting way of seeing it in the context of karma and how that moves forward. And I think what you were, based on what you were saying earlier, right? It's the question of taking credit for or not. How do we, like, if there's a smidgen of credit being taken, then we're still not free.
True. But we all, we're there.
Of course. Yeah.
And then we beat up on ourselves for,
right.
And then we're back in this kind of,
Of course. So it's hilarious in many ways. And so I think, when we get into the next aggregate of consciousness, then it's like, oh, where does that fall into all of this, right? And stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned.
For the continued story. And gosh, speaking of volition,
yeah,
I walked in the room and I walked in, I sat down, and I had to, I was late, so I left my coffee cup in the other room. It's like, I knew something was missing, and it's like, I gotta go. Anyway.
But you can think of Sankharas as sort of like, grinding the beans and preparing the coffee and, all that stuff.
Yeah, there you go.
Formation of something can be delicious or can be really bad, depending on what you've got in the pot.
Absolutely. And that becomes the perfect segue into our promo.
That's right.
You can support us by buying us a coffee at diggingthedharma.com.
Diggingthedharma.com. Let me put that.
Buy several. And we can always use it, and it really supports the show. Yeah. So we hope you found this to be useful in your own exploration, and tune in next week when we talk about consciousness. I think, right?
Yeah, we'll have to figure it
next
out.
time.
Next week or the week after, we'll see.
Whatever. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And until then,
Keep digging the
digging
Dharma. Yeah.
Okay, friends. Be well.
Be well.